Hi, this is Diana Payton with Technical Writing Uncensored, and I'm here with Chris Butta, Senior Technical Writing Manager at EA Games, who also writes fiction and has an absolutely epic Zoom background. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. I see you like Skyrim as well.
Hell to the yeah. Let me guess, Stealth Archer?
The current playthrough, yeah, but before that I was a Spellblade. Heavy armor and magic and two-handed stuff just for fun.
Nice.
Thank
So,
you.
how did you get into technical writing?
I actually fell into it not by choice, but because it was one of the few jobs that was available to me at the time. So I studied abroad for a few years in Japan. And when I came back, there weren't really that many jobs for a Japanese speaker. So I was at the pub with my mom. I pulled out my phone and I was like, look, mom, there is no friggin' jobs. And as it so happens, in the job portal, there was a single job for a Japanese speaking technical writer. I had no idea what that was. And I went and I interviewed. And yeah, the rest is history. It was a technical writing job in English, of course, but they needed a Japanese speaker because the client was a big Japanese corporation. So
Probably made talking to your SMEs a lot easier.
oh, definitely. Well, most of what I did was actually translating because when the clients sent people to train our engineers on the ground, the clients' people did not speak English or Romanian, and our people did not speak Japanese. So I had to be there to translate for them. Like for 2 weeks at a time, I was basically a joint at the hip with those fellas. That was fun.
So, is your accent Romanian?
It's kind of half Romanian, half Irish because I spent a long time in Ireland. I thought I was going to settle down there, but then I got a job offer to work in video games. So I left Ireland. I went to the UK, which was a choice because like 6 months later Brexit happened, and after that I was like, okay, I have to get out of Britain. So
Oh, man.
oh yeah.
So, how did you fall into game writing?
Funny story, actually. So my first brush with the games industry was translations. I was doing freelance Romanian to English, English to Romanian translation. And then I added Japanese to my language pairs as well. And I had this website. And one day this person gets in touch with me and says, hey, I have a game that you might be able to help with, but I need you to sign an NDA. And I'm thinking, okay, this is some cash grab mobile app nonsense. Okay, I'll sign your NDA. And she says, well, it's League of Legends. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because I was playing League every single day. So for a couple of years, I was a contract translator for League of Legends. And then when that kind of fell through, I went back to technical writing. And then whilst working as a technical writer for Workday in Dublin, I got an offer to be a tech writer on Unity, except it was an on-site position in Brighton. So it was kind of a no-brainer. I love Ireland. I love Dublin. If I ever retire, that's where I'm going to go. But I really, really wanted to be in games. So I said, okay, fine, let's see what's the crack with this. And it's been some years since. And I documented Unity, I documented Unreal Engine, and then I moved into people leadership whilst working at Epic Games. And then from Epic, I ended up at EA. And now I run the Frostbite documentation team at EA. So on the whole, it's been 7-8 years total, I think.
Wow, that's a ride.
I hopefully this is the one where I'm going to settle for a bit because,
Hey, fingers crossed for you. Oh, and I love your cup.
Oh, thank you. It's important to stay hydrated.
That too. And so, in addition to all of this and playing Skyrim, you also write fiction.
I do. That's actually been one of my oldest hobbies. I started telling stories when I was very young. And I used to get in trouble for it because I would just make up stories like, hey, Ma, guess what I saw at the playground today? And I guess they were realistic enough for my parents to like start digging into it and be like, it's not nice to lie. And then I started writing fiction. So short stories with my friends, with characters from the X-Men show on Fox News. I was obsessed with that when I was younger. And one thing led to another. And yeah, I started writing books just as a creative outlet. So I've been doing that seriously for about 5 years now.
And have you been published?
Yeah, 3 times, actually.
Cool. Are your books still in print?
2 of them are in print. One's a sci-fi called Gifted. The other one is a found family supernatural mystery story. It's called The Rivers Will Run Red, which is a cheeky nod to League of Legends, actually. And I also have a thriller, To Bloom Again, but that's currently just in audiobook form as I rework the story. And then I'm going to re-release the audiobook in the printed version as well. And I publish
Links
as
in
Kira North.
links in the description, guys.
Yes, I will. I'll send you the links. Thank you for that. I publish under the pen name Kira North because, as you can see, my real name has the word "but" in it. So when you write a romantic thriller, you kind of want something that's a little bit more mystical and, So, yeah, that is my real legal name, by the way. So,
Good.
I have the misfortune of it meaning bad things in like 3 separate languages. So,
And then, of course, there is a buttload And so, you're also a unit of measurement.
Okay.
All right. So, what are the similarities and differences for you between tech writing and fiction writing?
That is an excellent question. So, technical writing, in my experience, it's an exact science. It's very rigid. You always have to choose the simplest possible words, and you have to be very careful not to use any sort of linguistic fancy stuff. So, you can't use humor, you can't use metaphors, similes, complicated words, words that obfuscate the meaning, etc., right? You're very constrained in the words you use. Because the most important thing when you write technical documentation is, as you know, the information itself. That's the star of the show. And fiction is kind of the opposite of that, because it's not just the story you tell, it's not just the facts themselves, but the language you use can also shape how the readers perceive that story. If you use longer sentences versus shorter sentences, if you use fewer commas or no commas or more commas, and all of that amounts to rule breaking, which doesn't really mash with, if you want a strict adherence to grammar rules, then fiction is probably not for you, because you have to know the rules, but you have to be very smart about breaking them. I'm not saying I'm very smart. It's still a work in progress for me, but I've seen what the masters can do with just playing around with language alone. Like if I think about Sir Terry Pratchett's books, I think an editor would be like, oh my goodness, but his books work. Because he plays around with language so much that's half the time you get a chuckle just because he wrote something the way he did, not necessarily because of what's happening. So,
how is your fiction writing process informed by your technical writing experience?
The most important thing tech writing taught me is clarity. So I have to be clear. First of all, what do I want to say? What's the story? And second, how do I convey that to the reader in a way that makes sense? Because the story can make perfect sense in my head. I can have a scene just nailed down to every single beat. If the writing doesn't convey that, then I failed. And early on, when I was a newbie writer, I used to confuse how writing a book made me feel with how good it was. And I guess the harshest lesson I learned as an author, but also the most useful one, was exactly that. You may feel very good about having finished a book, and you feel very good because you know the story in your head. But if you have not conveyed that story to the writer with a certain degree of clarity, then they're not going to feel the same way. They're just going to be like, wait, what's this? Who's doing what? Why is this happening? And they're going to put the book down. So even when I use linguistic artifices, even when I get a little bit creative, I always want to make sure that what I want to say is still coming through on the page.
And how has your fiction writing informed your technical writing?
It's been a struggle. I'm not going to lie. So when I was still writing, I had to constantly stop myself from being a little bit playful and cheeky, like constantly. I was working on Unreal Engine documentation, and in one of the beginner pages, we use callouts, like we use tips and info and warning, that kind of callouts. And in one of the beginner pages, I actually put a tip callout and I said, don't stand in the fire, because the page was about creating a fire element in the level that damages the player's health. And if you've ever played any sort of MMO or anything with environmental damage, you don't stand in the fire. So, but that's rare. Generally, I try to keep it very separate. When I write technical documentation or any sort of internal documentation in my current job, I always make triple sure that it's all clear and there's nothing fancy in there. And somebody who speaks English as a second language will be able to understand that as well.
What's funny is that there are some specs, like serious governmental specs, that explicitly say that humor is allowed in documentation. So, just saying, you could have gotten away with that, potentially.
I mean, if I'm thinking about Slack documentation, I don't know if they're still doing that, but they used to be famous for that. Their docs were very casual and playful, I thought it was really cool. But then again, I was never in a position where I was a Slack user and I was pissed off about something and went to the docs for answers. I would imagine that does change the equation a little bit, but kudos to Slack for staying very coherent and on brand with everything they do.
Do you use AI and LLMs in either of your workflows?
See, that's a tricky question.
It is. That's why I ask him.
Right. I use AI, but never to produce content, ever. Like, that's a hard line that I personally don't want to cross. I do use AI in my day job. Unfortunately, most of that stuff is NDA'd, so I can't actually share how I use it. But when it comes to fiction, sometimes I use AI as a destructive reader. And what I mean by that is I give it a scene, a draft, whatever. And I say, you're the kind of reader that doesn't enjoy this. Or you have these specific views, or you're reading with this in mind. Okay, tear it apart, tear it down. And then I'm trying to see, okay, has AI actually found any good points in there? Like maybe this thing is structurally weak. Maybe I'm touching on some things that a sensitivity reader might pick up on. And Sometimes, not always, I do get valuable feedback. I've also tried to use AI as a line editor. Nope. Like the problem with that is that ChatGPT, at least, is the one I've tried. It's going to give very cookie cutter advice that does not take any sort of nuance into account. So it's just going to say, you can streamline this, you can make this prose snappier, you can make it, like it's kind of like a discount Hemingway or a discount Grammarly. And that is the opposite of what you want. If you're honing your author voice, if you're trying to use language as a device, not just as a vehicle for the story itself, but as a way to make readers feel stuff, you do not want that. Because if your prose starts to sound like a mass market paperback, the kind that you got people who churn out 2 or 3 of those a year, you lose your voice, and you don't want to lose your voice. Oh, and one other thing I use AI for is just coding. Like if I want to, one of the websites for my business, actually, for my publishing business, that's it's written in React. And I just connected Copilot to that repository. If I want to make a quick update to something, I could do it myself. But it's easier to just ask the bot, hey, could you go in and do this? And then I just verify that I put in the things it's supposed to put in. I'm like, cool, yeah, merge it, ship it, we're good.
Nice. Oh, but man, that gives me ideas for, taking a new piece of documentation and being like, okay, pretend that you're a brand new user and you're a little slow. Tell me what you think of this. Tell me if this works for you. And I don't know if it would be useful or not, but I bet it would be interesting.
I think that's a very good idea because it's definitely good at role playing when you give it sufficient guidelines, I think. If it can role play a destructive reader, it can definitely role play a newbie user as well. I'd be curious to see how that goes. And
what would also be more interesting for me, actually, is a more advanced user. Like pretend that you're someone who is, a senior engineer with lots of, C+ background. Tell me what you think of this. Give me your unbiased, harshest opinion, or something like that. Because that could be useful. Because I am not a expert C+ engineer or a other insert expert engineer here.
Yeah, I mean it's not our job to be expert engineers. That's why we got this music.
It's true. It is. But I'm just wondering, because I often think of LLMs as my pockets me. If there's something that is not particularly vital, and especially something that is not new, like, explaining to me some concepts about coding or something that I don't understand, or, hey, here's this piece of code, explain to me what it does, then it's useful. And then I don't have to bug my SME for that. And can save their cycles for something else. But hey, business. So tell me about your business. That is fascinating.
This summer, I registered a publishing business in British Columbia because, long story short, I've been burnt by bad publishers and agents 2 out of 3 times. And I'm like, you know what? I could definitely do better than these people. So initially, it just started out of spite. I'm like, screw it. If I'm going to self-publish, I might as well just do it under a business name and get some tax credits while I'm at it. And then I got to talking with other authors I know, and I thought, okay, this could actually be something interesting because I know authors who were refused by traditional publishing because they refused to tokenize themselves. Like think about, I'm not going to give specifics, but like think about a person, for instance, who's a part of, they have a certain background that is considered exotic by the Western mainstream. And that in itself is deeply problematic. But they don't write stories informed by that background. They want to write cyberpunk fantasy or something. But they're finding less traction because they're told, oh, why don't you write that kind of books instead? That'd sell very well. So they got to compromise between the stories they want to tell and actually making money. So my idea was, okay, my business is going to give people another way. If you don't want to compromise your author voice, if you don't want to compromise your artistic vision, let's work together. So that was the idea. And the vision is just to combine the quality of traditional publishing with the freedom of a boutique press. So we're not going to have like global distribution right out the gate. We're not going to localize in 12 different languages, but everything we publish is going to be quality. And that's the promise. And we're going to be digital first, just because, just until we get some, I forget what the technical term is, but basically until the business becomes more or less self-sustaining, because initially it's just me funding it. I didn't want to go after investors because investors come with their own ideas. And again, this is about artistic freedom of expression, right? And then later on, we're going to look into traditional distribution as well. Like once we have 10 or 12 titles in circulation.
I love that you are ambitious and you have a plan and a vision.
Thank you. I'm very much learning as I go. But, perfection is the enemy of good. I figured I'll just get started now because it's easy to register a business and I'll literally learn as I go. I have a couple of my own books that I can just use as test subjects. And we also signed our first author last month, and I'm very proud of that.
Huzzah!
It's somebody who writes thrillers, and I'm very, very excited to introduce him to the world, or to let himself introduce himself to the world when we're ready to announce his book. And I'm currently putting out feelers just within my immediate network until the website is stood up and ready to go. But if anybody has written a book and you're reasonably confident that the draft is polished and ready to be published, do get in touch and let's talk, because I might be able to help.
Awesome. Well, I will be sure to have your website or contact info or whatever is appropriate in the description. Check it out, folks.
Thank you.
All right. So are you working on any new books right now?
Yeah. So I'm working on a rewrite of my thriller because when I sold it to a publisher, one of their conditions was, okay, this is set in a fictional town, because I had set it in a fictional town that was kind of a combination between Dublin and Montreal. But I don't state it explicitly, because if you set it one place or the other, then you're constrained by realism, right? I didn't want that. My stuff is still believable, but I borrow from a lot of different. And the publisher said, no, it has to be a recognizable American city. And I said, but I've never been to America. I was like, and they said, okay, choose Seattle because it's close to the border. I'm like, fine. So I worked with a local consultant to set the story in Seattle. And then they had other ideas for how to change the story. And between that and an agent who did very destructive line edits, the manuscript that went to print and that was produced into an audiobook, that was not my book. That was ruined by committee. So now that I bought my rights back from those guys, I'm reworking the book into what it was originally supposed to be. And going back to the fictional setting, going back to the original vibe, which is more literary thriller than garden variety paperback, I guess. So that's my media project. And then once that's done and it's shipped, I'm looking to ship it around Valentine's next year in audiobook and print format. Once that's done, I am working on the sequel. I've already completed the first draft for the sequel, and it was very, very fun to write because I like the kind of intrigue that always keeps you guessing. I don't like stories where by page 50, you know how the book ends. So in the sequel, I had some fun with that. And what was funny working on that was I set out with an outline. And then by the time I reached page 50, I was like, okay, the outline no longer applies because the characters took on a life of their own. And as I got to know them, as I was writing about them, I'm like, wait a second, no, this person would not take that course of action because that's not true to their character. They would do this instead. And the thing I came up with was 10 times more interesting for me to explore because I'm like, hang on a sec, now you're surprising me. How the heck am I going to deal with that? And I'm the author.
Yeah, I value surprise when I'm reading so much. When I'm watching a show or TV, I've gotten really good at kind of intuiting where the twists are going to come. And so when I am truly, sincerely surprised by a plot twist, I love that so much.
I love to deliver. It's always fun.
Speaking of delivering, this is Technical Writing Uncensored. As much as I would love to geek out with you about all sorts of books, let's turn back to that. So you're working for a gaming company. What kind of tech writing do gaming companies need?
I think every studio is a little bit different, depending on the size, depending on the project. One thing I've found constant is it doesn't matter if you use a commercial engine or an in-house engine, is engine documentation. Because the people who make the game, they need to know how to make the game. So
all right, let me back up here for all you non-gamers. Would you please describe to people who are not gamers, what an engine is in this context? Because it doesn't go vroom.
Well, if your computer goes vroom, you're probably doing something wrong, but that can happen too. But a game engine is, at its core, it is the program that game developers use to make the game. And they might also use it for stuff like 3D modeling, like creating visual effects, but its primary purpose is to make the game.
All right. And so you document engines, and do you get to write the how-to manuals for the games as well, or what else do you do?
Unfortunately, no. I would imagine that's very fun, but I've never personally done it. So when you document a game engine, it depends what kind of content you produce. And there's two big types. There's the technical documentation. That's concepts, what a thing is, workflows, how to use the thing, and then reference all of the things you can use to configure the thing, all of the options and parameters and whatnot. And then there is learning content. So for example, you might have tutorials. Tutorials hold your hand throughout. And they tell you, now you go there and you click this and you drag that. And by the end of it, you will have a result that matches the example one-to-one. And multiple tutorials can come together, for example, in a course or in a learning path. My specialty when I was still writing was technical documentation. And mostly I focused on, I suppose I could talk about it because it's a past job and everything's public, but I focused on emergent tech like XR back at Unity and then MetaHuman, hyper-realistic digital characters at Epic Games. And both of these were very fun to work on because I got to see cool stuff before it hit the market. And I got to marvel and say, wow, you can do that now? For those who don't know, MetaHuman is Epic's hyper-realistic digital humans offering. And with an iPhone, you can literally animate a very realistic digital avatar of yourself, and it's all free, which it completely blew my mind at the time. The first time I did it, I'm like, whoa.
Okay, so are there any special tools that you need to know for writing for gaming companies?
That's a complex question. That's why I'm making this face, because on the one hand, it depends what's actually being used to write the documentation. Mm-hmm. So I've worked for companies that required writers to know how to use Markdown. So to know how to write Markdown, to know how to run a website build, maybe anything to do with that kind of content pipeline. Other places I've worked, they had a visual editor like, Confluence or in-house, something in-house. And then the second thing is there is a minimum of, I guess there are a few core skills that you do have to either know or acquire. So you have to be comfortable with version control, for instance, and you have to be comfortable building a version of the engine from whatever tool set exists at that company, right? So it might mean that you run something through a command line, it might be a visual interface, but the idea is you have to be able to build the engine yourself, because then you test a new feature that you're documenting, you take all of your screenshots, etc. One thing that I've constantly found whilst working for game companies is you cannot just rely on SMEs because they are busy. They're always busy. Much as they want to help, getting their time it can be an ordeal. So you kind of have to become your own SME up to a degree for basic things. And then for super advanced things, you do have to sit them down and you have to get that knowledge out of their head and onto the screen or onto a page or something.
All right. So I was going to ask, what are the particular challenges for gaming writing? But I think you've answered at least some of them. Any other challenges that you've run into besides probably not talking about the cool things because you're covered by an NDA?
Yeah, a lot of cool things are NDA'd, so you can't even talk to your friends about it. Or if you work on site, you're walking around the studio and hey, something really cool is coming for this title that everybody likes and plays. You cannot say that. All of that is NDA. But I'd say the biggest challenge right now in games is just the instability overall, because it doesn't matter where you work. Layoffs are just a constant right now. And there's a lot of talk about mergers and acquisitions and venture capital leaving the market. Everybody's moving to AI now. So I would say, yeah, for anybody who wants a career in games, that's the first thing to consider, is that it's really not stable right now. So everybody I know has a plan B, especially in support disciplines like documentation, for instance. Everybody I know has a plan B. Well,
for people who've heard that and say, well, I still want to get into it, any advice for those folks?
Yes, I'm just considering how the market has changed in the last couple of years. So the first thing to keep in mind is that it's really competitive. It's not as competitive as something like narrative design. That market is ridiculously saturated with talent right now. But if you want to get into games as a tech writer, it really, really helps to show that you have some experience with game engines. Whether it's you made something in Unity, like a demo, or you made anything where you touched an engine and you produced something that's playable, or that you at least made a video and you can upload it somewhere. So it can be something that you made as part of a game jam, something you made in your free time, but that will set you ahead of around 90% of candidates. Again, speaking from my own experience at the companies I've worked at, we were always looking for people with game engine experience. And one of the reasons for that is that the ramp up can be brutal if you've never touched a game engine before. Like I remember when I joined Unity, I had never touched a game engine before. And it took sustained effort across multiple months before I could say, okay, I'm comfortable in the engine. I know what I'm doing. And Unity was kind enough they had a bunch of resources I could use to learn. But coming into that, you're expected to contribute quickly. You're expected to hit the ground running. So engine knowledge, that's a must. And then the second thing is, if at all possible, reach out to somebody who already works in the industry, who's hiring people, and have them review your portfolio and your CV. And super, super important, talk to somebody in the industry, because there's so many people out there who offer paid resume writing services and they've never hired a person in their life. Nobody can guarantee you a job in this industry. Nobody can guarantee you that your resume will beat the ATS. And by the way, if anybody wants their resume reviewed to get into games, hit me up. I'm happy to look at it for free. No strings attached.
Nice. That is an incredibly generous offer, Chris.
Just paying it forward. When I was getting started in games, not in technical writing, but in games, a friend of mine who worked at Blizzard took like 3 hours out of his day to sit down with me and to teach me how to interview, how to talk to people in the industry, how to conduct myself, how to write my samples. And that made a huge difference. So I'm just paying it forward.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Any advice for technical writers in general in this weird job market situation that we're in?
Oh man, I don't know if I'm in any position to give advice right now because it feels like I'm relearning the basics of our job every 6 months.
Is that a game? Do you think that's a tech writing thing or a game tech writing thing in particular?
That's an excellent question. I can speak for games. And the reason I say this is because AI has become very, very disruptive. And let me put it this way. I'm not afraid that AI is going to take my job. It cannot do that. Full stop. I am terrified of executives who think AI can take my job because people who don't have any experience will say, oh, it's just words on a screen. AI can do that. But they don't see all of the labor we do, interviewing subject matter experts and all the information architecture we're doing and knowing how to structure things, giving the users the information they need when they need it. So one way I think, at least that's what I'm trying to stay safe, is I'm learning these AI tools and I have an openness towards trying things and seeing if anything works and anything can help me in my day-to-day. One thing I think is a disservice in general is if you're very militant anti-AI, like everybody's entitled to their own beliefs, and I feel some sort of way about AI as well. But that might spook the people who want to hire you because they have dollar signs in their eyes and like, this is the future. When the bubble inevitably bursts, they're going to be proven wrong, of course. And that can happen soon enough. But in the meantime, just to be on the safe side, learn these tools and be ready to talk about how, oh yeah, sure, I found this use case where it saved me time or money or whatever. Even if it's 90% bollocks, they don't have to know that.
Yeah. I worked for an ML ops company for a little while, and so got some basic grounding in machine learning and understanding how these things work under the hood kind of has been so valuable because suddenly it's not magic. It's just math with words. It's like I've heard it described as the most impressive autocomplete that someone had ever seen, which is not to say it can't have its uses, but it has some pretty strict limitations that you need to be aware of. And yeah, sooner that people realize that and also realize that there is more to machine learning than LLMs. There's so much that machine learning can do that just blows my mind. And I'm hoping that eventually humanity will use it for good.
I hope so too. I mean, unironically, AI can cure cancers. Because there's no such thing as universal cure for cancer, I don't think, but it can cure cancers, all of them, unironically. But yeah, LLMs themselves, there was a paper that came out recently or an article, I can't remember, but it said hallucinations are basically inevitable because of the way LLMs work under the hood. So all of a sudden, the vast majority of use cases that are being touted for this thing, they go right out the window. And in technical writing, you need precision. You need every single word has to be used deliberately. Whereas the example I like to give is, if you give AI a sentence like, in my backyard, I have 5 chicken and 3 ducks, it might summarize and say, in my backyard, I have 8 chickens and ducks, which is not the same thing. But that's how it thinks about it. So I've been able to verify over and over that it's not.
Except it doesn't think. It doesn't think.
Yeah, exactly. It does not think. So calling it artificial intelligence, I think, is a bit of a misnomer because intelligence is.
Yeah. I mean, artificial, yes. Intelligence, no. It's like calling the cloud when it's really living on a giant server somewhere that went down last Monday and screwed up all of the internet.
Yeah, that was equal parts funny and terrifying to see.
Oh, yeah. It really was.
Also, didn't Amazon executives say that a vast majority of production code is now written by AI? Sorry, I cannot resist the burn, but...
Yep. Yeah, and there's a not inconsiderable number of engineers ringing alarm bells there that they're introducing more and more security issues and more debt that they're not fixing, and that the LLMs and the co-pilots of the world are not going to be able to fix for you.
No comment.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Oh, all right. So, any words of wisdom or humor to leave us with, Chris? Like, what's your next Skyrim build?
I'm going to finish this Stealth Archer playthrough. I built a mod list of like, it took me a month and a half to build the mod list, and now I finally get to play the video game. So it's going to be a Khajiit Stealth Archer for a little bit, just have fun with it. And after that, I'm probably going to play a Snow Elf Mage or something, because I have that add-on. But, words of wisdom. Honestly, my philosophy has been like, you get knocked down, you get back up, which is very cliche. I'm not the only one who's saying it, but it served me well. Because in this, I've been fired before, I've been let go before, I've had career setbacks before. And every time I thought this is over, oh my goodness, I was much younger, much more emotional. And it was never the end. I always managed to come back from that. So, you give yourself the time to grieve. You feel bad about it. You do what you got to do. You take care of yourself, but then you get up and you keep going. Because if you don't, if you lock yourself in that mentality where, oh, my life is over because this one thing failed, nobody's going to come and save you. You have to pull yourself back up. So if this helps anybody else think about, contextualize their setbacks a little bit, then I'm glad.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, reach out to your community, whether it's on LinkedIn or write the docs. Tech writers have big hearts, and we have all been there. So someone has been there close enough, and they can assure you that you will get there and you'll get through it. And on that note, this has been Technical Writing Uncensored. Thank you so much for joining me, Chris. And if you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. It really helps out the channel. This is Diana Payton with Chris Butta on Technical Writing Uncensored. Signing off for now, and enjoy your next Skyrim or other game playthrough. Hey, if you're a gamer, leave a note in the comment about what you're playing right now. Or if you're a reader, which I hope you are if you're watching this channel, tell us what your current read is. We want to know.